Okay, we are Lamed Beis Amud Aleph 32a. We're middle of the Mishnah. And before Shabbos, we went through the list in the Mishnah. One list of mitzvahs which require us to recite or say certain things. And we go through a list of such things. There's got to be a word for it. Mitzvah. In Hebrew, you say mitzvah shebedibur, mitzvahs of speech, mitzvahs of verbalization. So we went through a list that can be done in any language. And it seems, as we're going to see, that the premise is, why shouldn't you say it in any language? Especially when, as we learned and we discussed at length before Shabbos, that each of these mitzvahs have meaning as to what you're saying. You're taking an oath. You can't take an oath if you don't understand what you're saying. You're thanking God. Well, if you're just mumbling words, you don't know what they mean, then what kind of thank you is that? And so on and so forth. And then we went through a list which specifically has to be read in the original Hebrew text as presented in the Torah. What the Gemara is going to do, the Mishnah is going to do now, is the Mishnah is going to go through that list, the list of mitzvahs which are required to be said in the original Lashon Kodesh, and cite to verses that indicate to us that it indeed needs to be done in the original language. Now, from this fact that the Mishnah goes through the verses to indicate when you have to say it in the original Hebrew, and does not go through verses to indicate when you could say it in any language, and indicates to me that the premise is, well, why shouldn't you do it in any language? Only when Torah specifically states it has to be done in Hebrew, then you do it in Hebrew. That's what it would seem to me. But I'm sure there's other commentaries in that regard. Okay, so let's see.
Is it true when you read Talmud, it's better to do it in Hebrew?
There's value to the Hebrew.
There you go.
There is value to the original Hebrew. We discussed this a little bit before Shabbos also, like the virtue of the spontaneous, which you understand, versus the virtue of saying the words as they are, because those words have the, it's like the spiritual code that unlocks whatever needs to be unlocked. So it has that virtue, but there's the plus and the minus as we talked about. Okay, so let's see, where are we? Bikurim Ketzad. Bikurim Ketzad. So it's the middle of the Mishnah. If you count down from the top of the Mishnah, which is Elu, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down from the beginning of the Mishnah. In the middle there, it says Bikurim Ketzad. So Bikurim, the first mitzvah on the list of mitzvahs that we said have to be recited specifically in Lashon HaKodesh, in the original Hebrew, is the mitzvah Bikurim. The mitzvah Bikurim, of course, is the basket of fruit from the specific fruit that belonged to Eretz Yisrael, that's brought from all over Israel from the various different farmers who bring it up to the temple in great celebration. And when they bring it there, the Torah says, Vanisa v'amarta, you shall respond and state, L'fnei Hashem Elokecha, before God your Lord. And then the verse goes on to describe a whole text that you are supposed to say. And as I mentioned, it's the text that has the narrative of the Jewish people from Avraham till they come to the land of Israel, which is why we read that text at the Seder night and expound on that text as per the Mishnah in Pesachim. So here the verse says, Vanisa v'amarta, you shall respond and say. Now that word, and you shall respond, is a unique phrasing, which in theory didn't even have to be there. It could have just said, and you shall say, as opposed to, and you shall respond and say. So that word, Vanisa, and you shall respond, becomes the operative word that we're going to cite to in all the verses going forward. And what it's going to do is we're going to compare it to the blessings and curses. The blessings and curses were on the list of things that were said originally in Lashon HaKodesh when Moshe Rabbeinu gave the blessings and curses to the Jewish people. Now, the Mishnah is not going to tell us how we know that the blessings and curses itself were done in the original Hebrew. That we'll get to. But accepting that those were stated in the original Hebrew. So and the language there is, as we're going to see, later, with respect to the blessings and curses, the verse reads, Va'anu alavim, va'amru, and the Levites responded and said, using again this phrase, responded, teaching us that this word responded indicates it's got to be stated in the language as it's written in the Lashon HaKodesh. because that's the phrasing used by the Leviim responding to Moshe Rabbeinu when Moshe Rabbeinu is giving the blessings and curses. And therefore, Malahalan, just like there, with respect to the blessings and curses at the mountains, as we'll describe soon, but Lashon HaKodesh was in the original Hebrew, Afkan. So to here, with respect to the Bikurim, where the verse uses, and you shall respond and say, that language respond, the Lashon HaKodesh has got to be done in the original Hebrew. So that's what's going to happen now. The Mishnah is going to go through the whole list of things that we said have to be read in the original Lashon HaKodesh, and going to cite to a verse in which the Torah uses this language, respond. And because the Torah uses the language respond by the blessings and curses, and there it was in the actual Hebrew, so too anywhere else where it uses the language respond, it means say in the specific language. Whereas other places where it says, and you shall say, without using the word respond, it means any language. The Shema, Tefillah, grace after meals, the vows, the Sotah vow and curse, and the person who declares that he gave away all the tithe is responsible for. But the rest of the list, as we're going to indicate now, also have this word, va'anisa, and you shall respond. So likewise, chalitza, next on the list was chalitza. Chalitza, of course, is that procedure in which a man, a woman, a widow, a childless widow, has to go through the proceeding of separating from the brother-in-law, where he takes the shoe off. It's called chalitza. And the verse says she recites something. And there too it says, va'anisa va'amra, she shall respond and say. And this again is compared, this is compared to later where the verse describes, va'anu al-Leviim, the Leviim responded to the curses. Va'amru, and they said. So Ba'alahalan, just like over there with the blessings and curses, Lashon HaKodesh, they said it in the holy tongue. And the verse uses language, va'anu, and they responded. So Afkan, so to here with chalitza, but the verse uses the language, va'anisa, va'ansa, I'm sorry. And she responds, but Lashon HaKodesh has got to be the original language. So I don't know if it's Gzeira Shava. I'm not sure if this is Gzeira Shava. There's two principles here that could be used, and I'm not sure which one it is. I'm looking at Rashi. I don't see from Rashi. Maybe Rashi helps us. Hold on a second.
Because you said earlier that in theory that word respond doesn't necessarily have to be there. I'm not sure what it meant, but
sorry?
Earlier on you had said that word respond.
Does it right? But
in theory didn't need to
that
be
could be
there.
with Gzeira Shava also.
I didn't know if that word was free to be used.
Actually, Rashi actually does say it's Gzeira Shava. Rashi does say it's Gzeira Shava. Okay, I wasn't sure which principle it is, but Rashi tells us which principle. It's the principle of Gzeira Shava, which is when two words appear the same in two different places, then under the right circumstances, those two can teach each other things. Rashi uses the word Gzeira Shava. I wasn't sure if it was something called a binyan av. A binyan av is when a principle is established in a text, in a verse, and then that serves as like a guideline for everything else in Torah. I wasn't sure if that was the case, but Rashi actually uses the word Gzeira Shava, which is another one of the 13 principles, which is when there's two words that have two laws that share the same word, they can derive from each other. So, but even when it comes to Gzeira Shava, the word you're using has to be free for interpretation. If the word you're using is needed for the actual text, it cannot be used in Gzeira Shava. So even in that circumstance, you would need to have the word free, which is in all cases. Here, I believe, because all of them say va'ansa, va'anisa va'amra. It says both respond and amra and say, making the word respond extra.
In theory, that word respond wasn't
That's right.
necessary for the verse.
That's right. So it's open. It's open for Gzeira Shava. That's right. It's open for this comparative analysis. Yeah. Okay. So Rabbi Huda says that we do not need this Gzeira Shava to derive that the chalitza, this woman who takes the shoe off her deceased husband's brother, or I'm sorry, reverse. The deceased husband's brother takes off the shoe from her and she gives a speech. Says Rabbi Huda, you don't need Gzeira Shava because va'ansa va'amra. It says she shall respond and she shall say. That in of itself, that just the translation itself indicates, say it as follows. Kacha. It seems to it seems to indicate, I'm sorry, the verse itself says kacha. The verse itself says like this. Where's the verse? The verse is on the side. Yeah, it says, "Va'ansa va'amra kacha yasalish." The word kacha actually belongs to the text that she says. It says she should respond and say, "Such shall be done to the man who doesn't keep his brother's house," and so on. But this word kacha, "such shall be done," sounds like it has to be done exactly as follows. That's everybody's indication. So this indicates that it must be said in this actual language. So because this verse has the word kacha like this, Rabbi Huda says you don't need to compare it to anywhere else. The text itself implies it's got to be done exactly as it is. Okay. Now, at this point, because that's the order of the list earlier, the Mishnah now gets to describing the actual event of the blessing of the curses, which is as follows. Brachos, the klolos, ketzad. The blessings and the curses at the mountain, how did it go down? So says the Mishnah, once the Jewish people crossed the Jordan, Ubo, when they arrived, Al Har Grizim, to Mount Grizim, Al Har Evel, and to Mount Evel, Sheba Shemron, which is in a region called Shemron, Shebetzad Sechem, which is near the town Shechem, Sheba Eitzel Elon Mamre, which is in a section called Elon Mamre. And the Gemara is going to indicate, the Mishnah is going to quote verses which tell us that they were over beyond the Jordan, and that beyond the Jordan is near Shechem and Elon Mamre. So first it's going to quote the verse describing the Jewish people getting the curses, where there it says, they are indeed across the Jordan. And now with respect to Avram Avinu's travels, it says, and Abraham traveled the land, ad Makam Shechem, until the point of Shechem, ad Elon Maira, to the area of Elon Maira, which is the same to Ma Elon Maira Amar Lahalan Shechem, Af Elon Maira Amar Kan Shechem, just as Elon Maira by Abraham, there it says Shechem, so to Elon Maira, described by the Jewish people in the desert, is also near Shechem. So that's where they are. All right. It actually gives us a little background. No, nothing on that. Okay. So continues the text of the Mishnah. Here we are. So Shisha Shvatim, Alul Rosh HaGrizim, 6 of the 12 tribes goes up to the Mount Grizim. The Shisha Shvatim and 6 of the 12 tribes, Alul Rosh Har Evel, go up to the Mount Evel. Va'koyin va'alavim va'aron omdim lamata b'emtza. The Kohanim, the Levites, and the Aron, the Ark, with the tablets in there, stand on the bottom in the middle, which is like an amphitheater, basically. Today, we kind of put stages higher because we have microphones. But actually, if you're looking for an echo, you go lower. Like the sound will travel and bounce off the walls or the surroundings. So in ancient times, go to Rome, the stadium is also clear like that. It was the amphitheater, the action's in the middle, and everybody stands higher. So the same thing here. The Kohanim, the Levim, and the Aron are in the middle. HaKohanim Makifin is the Aron. The Kohanim circled, standing around in a circle around the ark. Ba'alavim ela Kohanim, and the Levium, the Levites, surrounded the Kohanim. So there's a circle. It's like the ark, Kohanim, Levium, and then the Jewish people. And all the Jewish people from this side and from that side of the two mountains. Shenemar, as the verse reads, Yisrael, and all the Jewish people, V'zakanim and their elders, V'shoitev and their policemen, V'shoitev and their judges. Stand on this side and on that side of the Aron, which were in the middle. The Gomer, etc. So Hafchu Paneim, the people in the center, the Kohanim and the Levites, turned to face Klape Har Grizim, toward Har Grizim, toward Mount Grizim. Upaschem Bracha, and they began the blessing. Baruch Eish, blessed is the one Asher Lo Yasa Pesel Masecha, who will not make a graven image, an idol worship. Ve'elu, and both sides of the mountain. Amen, they say Amen. So they gave the blessing facing Mount Gerizim. They turned their faces facing toward Har Evel. And then they say the curse that's parallel to the blessing they just described, which is curse is the one who will make a graven image. And then the Elav Amrein, and both sides respond Amen. Until they conclude all the blessings and the curses, turning back and forth between the two mountains, and both sides responding Amen. Afterwards, as the verse describes, they brought the stones described in the verse, and they built a altar, and they plastered it with cement. The Kosvolov, and they wrote on this plaster, as called Divrei Torah, all of Torah, Shivim Loshin, translated into 70 languages. So that was the moment that Moshe Rabbeinu empowered the generations to go forward to teach Torah in any language other than the original Hebrew, which is presumably why the Mishnah is quoting this whole story. On one level, it's quoting it because this is the story of the blessing and the curses, what indicates to us that it has to be done in the original Hebrew, which is, it's kind of ironic, but the Mishnah is doing it on purpose, I think. On the simple reading, the Mishnah quotes the story of the blessing and the curses because that's the foundation upon which all the other verses rely to say in the original Hebrew. But for that, the Mishnah didn't have to tell us the whole backstory, just quote the verse, finished, don't have to tell us the whole story. But by telling us the whole story and coming down a path that actually in this text, in that very storyline, which indicates that it has to be done in the original Hebrew, there's also embedded in that storyline empowerment to use any language. This moment, when Moshe Rabbeinu writes all of the Torah in all 70 languages, and in that moment, he opens up the spiritual gate to allow for Torah to be communicated in any language, including the fact that we're speaking in English now. So it's the same story. The language where it says Va'ansa Levim, the Levim responded. And from there we derive to the other places where it says they responded to teach us that it has to be in original Hebrew. But go further on in that story. And there Moshe Rabbeinu translates it in English, empowering the other list to allow us to read in English. So it's kind of ironic in that the same storyline has both the teaching that should be in Hebrew, as well as the empowerment that it can be done in other languages as well.
How can you write Torah in 70 languages?
I don't know how this happened on a very physical level.
This is so tedious. So
I don't know how this is possible. And the truth is, with Moshe Rabbeinu's death is the same thing. On the day he died, he wrote 13 Torahs. So, I mean, I don't know, and this is from memory, but the best place to go is actually probably to look at the Chumash we have there with the English. If you look up Dvarim, Deuteronomy 27, there in their translation, in the commentary, they should explain. But if I remember, somewhere in my memory, I have this idea that one of the ways to explain it is that actually the Torahs were written over his entire lifespan. As the Torah developed, he kept writing. And then he concluded it on the day he died, making that more feasible than writing all of it in one day. Yeah, 27:8, what does it say there?
Verse 8?
Yeah.
Just the bold or read the whole?
No, with the commentary, because we're looking for Rashi's explanation.
Before you sacrifice on this ad hoc altar, you must first write upon the plastered boulders all the words of this Torah, translated very clearly into the world's 70 archetypal languages. After this.
Okay, so it seems like it was done on that day. No indication that it was done over time. Because they built it then. They built the whole structure of this temporary altar, and they covered it in plaster, and then they wrote on the plaster languages, which means it was done that day.
Yes, after this, still on the same day.
Right. So does Moshe Rabbeinu do it himself, or does he commission people to help him?
It says you must scrape.
Right, but then, okay, keep on going.
Off the altar, dismantle and return, bringing all this.
No indication about if you have any help.
You must. Yeah, it doesn't.
Okay, we have to look at other things then, unless this is a miraculous experience, which is a possibility too. Okay, so Shenemar, as the verse reads, how do we know that it was done in 70 languages? As the verse reads, if you just quoted, Be'ed Hativ, the Torah says you should write on this, the Torah says you should take these stones upon which they made this offering. But before you make the offering, you have to cover it with with a plaster. And on that plaster, you should write all the words of the Torah, explain very well. So what does explain very well mean? Here the Mishnah is interpreting explain very well to mean translated into all languages. Then they remove those stones. It's temporary structure. Uba'u, and they arrived. V'lanu, and they rested. I'm going to the next page here. Oops, not that way. Okay, let's do this. Sorry, I'm just turning the page. V'lanu, in Makaimon, and they spent the night there in Gilgal, which is where they put the stones up.
It says to your initial encampment in the commentary.
Yeah, so it's right. That's right. They went back to their original place. That's right. They went the Makaimon to their place, meaning to Gilgal, not which is where they are now, which is on the mountains. They didn't rest in the mountains, but they walked back to their place in Gilgal. Okay, so the Mishnah, as I mentioned, which you see now, ends here and does not quote anything with regard to backing up the notion that all the other items in the list can be done in any other language. But the Mishnah will do that. The Mishnah will go through each of them and indicate from the verses that can be done in any language.
How many letters are in the Torah? 600,000?
It's less than 600,000. Much less.
70?
Yeah, it's a lot. So what's interesting is that the Mishnah only went through, it didn't go through the whole list of things that have to be spoken in Hebrew. All they talked about was chalitza and bikurim. They didn't quote the other ones, egla rufa, or any other ones. So I'm assuming the Mishnah will do that for us. I'm assuming, sorry, the Gemara will do that for us. Let's go to the next page. I believe the Gemara is going to do it for us. But let's just see. I'm just scanning ahead. Okay, I don't see it right now, but it's curious that the Mishnah does not go through all of them. It just goes through, it stops at the blessings and curses, but the list keeps on going in the Mishnah itself before. There's Egla Roof on the list. What else is on the list over there? We only mentioned Bikurim and Chalitza. We only quoted verses as far as Bikurim and Chalitza went. But now we didn't go through anything else. So I'm just scanning through the Gemara to see if the Gemara does it later. But it's just curious if the Mishnah does not. Even if the Gemara does, it's still curious if the Mishnah doesn't.
Where does one begin and where does it end and the Gemara begins?
So the Gimel Men at the top in the middle of the page, Gimel Men means Gemaras. That's the end of the Mishnah. And the Gemara goes forward from there.
Okay.
It's an apostrophe. Like, sorry? What'd you say?
I think I saw something about talking about Shema.
Shema is any language, and that the Gemara will discuss. I'm trying to figure out why the rest of the list, where it says it has to be done in Hebrew, is not mentioned in the Mishnah. It just goes through the first three and then stops there. It doesn't go on to explain the other ones.
305,000 letters.
305,000 letters, there you go.
Multiplied by 70.
It's a lot. Yeah, so we have to look up the commentaries.
Where do you find the tablets for all that?
No, it's not tablets. It's on, this is on tablets. This is on, the way I had rocks and then plaster.
And plaster. So imagine how much time that takes.
It's a lot.
No, they make God had a different.
It does not seem like the Gemara discusses those verses, which is, again, curious. I suppose so.
And very tiny. 2 million letters. Yeah.
It's a lot of letters, yeah.
You know, he says that Abraham couldn't circumcise himself. God's hand was on his hand.
To guide him.
I'll bet you that's what happened there.
It would make sense?
That God's hand was on Moshe's hand.
That would make sense, yeah.
Because it's impossible to write 2 million letters in a matter of a day or 2 or a week or a year.
Yeah, well, the Gemara is going to discuss it. Oh, there we go. The very next Mishnah. Okay, so the Mishnah we read, that's what I thought was going to happen. I was looking for this. The Mishnah we just read, which just concluded, continues into the next Mishnah. And the next Mishnah will go through the rest of the list and telling us how we know that the blessing of the Kohanim and so on, how we know that it has to be done in original Hebrew. That's coming in the next Mishnah. I was looking for that. I thought that would be the case. Because if the Gemara doesn't do it, that means it knows the Mishnah is going to.
The next Mishnah is very far from.
Yeah, lots of commentary in between. But that's going to be coming up, I guess, later pages. Okay, have a wonderful day, Eden. And God willing, tomorrow we explore the mitzvahs that may be done in other languages and how we know that.